Here's something few people talk about. Most men over 60 live with secret dreams they never put into words. Not dreams of fast cars, wild nights, or chasing youth, but something far more powerful. Quiet fantasies of love that is deeper, safer, and more tender than anything they experienced in their younger years. At this age, a man's heart often longs for things that money can't buy. Like being truly seen, being valued beyond his wrinkles, and sharing small, joyful moments that turn ordinary days into unforgettable memories. And here's the surprising truth. Many women don't realize how vivid and alive these dreams are. While society often assumes men stop craving romance or intimacy after 60, the reality is the opposite. This stage of life awakens a hunger for connection that is richer and more meaningful than ever before. Men imagine not just holding hands but holding hearts, creating bonds that prove love doesn't fade, it matures. If you've ever wondered what real love looks like after 60, or if you've questioned whether passion and devotion can still exist later in life, you're in the right place. What you're about to discover may surprise you and maybe even inspire you. So, before we dive in, take a moment to hit that like button, subscribe to Senior Relationships After 60, and join a community that believes love is not a chapter that closes. It's a story that keeps growing stronger with age. Meet Aldric. At 67, this soft-spoken widower from Ohio never imagined he'd be a part of a love story again. After losing his wife of nearly 4 decades, he quietly convinced himself that romance had an expiration date, that maybe companionship was the best he could hope for, and passion belonged to younger people. He spent most of his days tending his small garden, watching the seasons pass, and filling his evenings with old Western movies. To friends and neighbors, Aldric looked like a man who had accepted the calm of his later years. But beneath the surface, something unspoken was stirring. Aldric carried dreams he never dared to tell anyone. Not his grown children, not his close buddies from the Veterans Hall, not even the pastor who often checked in on him. These weren't dreams of wealth, adventure, or starting over. They were simple, deeply human fantasies. The desire to laugh with someone over coffee in the morning, to feel a hand slip into his during a slow evening walk, and to know that his heart still had the power to make someone else feel safe and cherished. Then came a moment that shifted everything. At a local community center, he was introduced to Miriam, a retired school librarian with a wit as sharp as her eyes were kind. Their first conversation wasn't about love, but about their shared frustration over how technology seemed to complicate more than it solved. Yet, Aldric walked away with a spark in his chest, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't just attraction. It was the realization that perhaps life was offering him a second chance, and that love, far from being over, might actually grow more profound with age. Here's where Aldric's story becomes a mirror. Because what he began to discover wasn't unique to him, it reflects what millions of men quietly fantasize about but rarely voice. They long to be seen not as men who have passed their prime, but as partners who still have hearts full of passion and tenderness to give. They dream of intimacy that feels deeper, laughter that feels freer, and connection that feels more honest than it did in their younger days. What Aldric experienced next will challenge what many believe about men over 60. His journey shows that romance doesn't vanish with time. It evolves, becoming richer and more meaningful than he ever thought possible. And the truths he uncovered will surprise you, because they are the very things countless men only fantasize about doing for the women they love. When most people think about what men over 60 want in love, the mind usually goes to companionship, maybe physical intimacy, or simply having someone around to share daily routines. But the deeper truth is something few men will admit out loud, even to themselves. At this stage of life, many men secretly fantasize about being able to take off the armor they've carried for decades and finally be emotionally safe with someone. Think about it. For years, men of this generation were taught to be strong providers, protectors, problem solvers. Showing weakness was often seen as failure. Many grew up in households where a man's tears were met with phrases like, "Be tough," or "Real men don't cry." And so, the habit of hiding pain, doubts, or fears became second nature. But now, in their 60s and beyond, that armor feels heavy. The battles of career, raising a family, and meeting expectations are behind them. What they crave isn't applause for being strong, it's permission to be real. Aldric knew this feeling all too well. After years of putting on a brave face for his children and pretending he was fine after his wife passed, he admitted to Miriam one evening that he often felt afraid of growing old alone. He expected her to brush it off, maybe change the subject. Instead, she reached across the table, squeezed his hand and said, "Thank you for trusting me with that." That moment wasn't dramatic, but it was transformative. For Aldric, it was the first time in years he felt that his heart could rest in the presence of another person. This is the fantasy. A safe space where a man can share his aging worries, regrets, or even small insecurities without judgment or shame. It's the freedom to say, "I'm scared of losing my independence," or, "I regret not spending more time with my kids when they were young," and know he won't be laughed at or dismissed. Instead, he'll be met with empathy, patience, and love. For women watching, this is powerful to understand. Men may not openly ask for emotional safety, but it's one of the greatest gifts you can give. Listening without rushing to fix, acknowledging without criticizing, and holding space without conditions can unlock a level of closeness that many couples never experience in their younger years. For many men, this is the first time in life they long to be completely unarmored. And when they find that safe haven, the love they give back is deeper, more committed, and more vulnerable than ever before. Have you ever wished someone could hold your truths without flinching? Tell us in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts. When people picture romance after 60, they often imagine something quiet and steady. Companionship, maybe evening walks, maybe a safe routine. But here's the truth most don't realize. Many men secretly fantasize about something far lighter, more joyful, and wonderfully surprising. They long to bring playfulness back into love, without the weight of performance, pressure, or expectation. It's not about chasing the kind of passion they had in their 20s. It's about rediscovering small, silly joys that make life feel alive again. For some men, it's the fantasy of pulling their partner into the kitchen while the radio hums softly, kicking off their slippers, and dancing barefoot on the tiles with laughter instead of music filling the room. For others, it's watching a corny old sitcom and laughing so hard tears roll down their face. Or maybe it's singing along to a favorite song from the 70s, even when they're hopelessly out of tune, just to see their partner smile. For Aldric, this came alive one summer evening when Miriam teased him about always being so serious. Without thinking, he reached for her hand and spun her around in the living room while an old Frank Sinatra record played in the background. They stumbled, they laughed, and neither cared that their movements were clumsy. In that moment, Aldric realized something important. Playfulness isn't about being young. It's about being free. Men in their 60s and beyond often fantasize about experiencing these little bursts of joy again because they remind them of who they once were before responsibilities weighed them down. It's not about proving anything or chasing an image of youth. It's about finally having the courage to laugh, to be silly, and to let go of self-consciousness. For women watching, here's the key. Playfulness doesn't have to be grand or planned. Sometimes it's as simple as poking fun, surprising him with his favorite dessert, or daring him to join you in something spontaneous. These small sparks bring energy back into the relationship and create moments that both partners will treasure far more than expensive gifts or elaborate plans. Playfulness heals, refreshes, and binds hearts together. It's a reminder that love after 60 doesn't have to be serious all the time. It can be light, fun, and beautifully imperfect. And yet, while playfulness is a fantasy many men quietly hold on to, the next one is even more surprising, because it's something most women never expect men to admit they long for. One of the most powerful yet least spoken fantasies men over 60 carry is this. They want to feel admired, not for who they were decades ago, but for who they are right now. It's not about competing with younger versions of themselves or trying to relive their youth. It's about being seen as valuable, attractive, and capable in the present moment. For men who have weathered life's storms, admiration is like oxygen. It affirms that despite gray hair, wrinkles, or slowing steps, they still matter, they still have something to offer, and they can still spark joy in the heart of the woman they love. Too often, society paints older men as invisible, as though their days of being desired are long gone. But privately, many fantasize about hearing words or seeing gestures that remind them they are still cherished, not as they once were, but as they are now. Aldric discovered this one afternoon while unloading groceries from the car. He grabbed 2 heavy bags, out of habit more than pride, and carried them inside. Miriam looked at him, smiled warmly, and said, "My hero." It was just 2 words, but they lit something inside him. He wasn't proving his strength, he wasn't trying to impress. Yet in that moment he felt admired. And for Aldric, that tiny spark of recognition meant more than any grand declaration could. Admiration doesn't have to be about strength. It can be as simple as saying, "I love how thoughtful you are," or "I admire the way you handle challenges with grace," or even noticing the way he still puts effort into small things. Compliments are powerful, but for many men over 60, they're rare. They may receive respect from children or colleagues, but the kind of admiration that says, "You are still my man," is something they deeply crave from their partner. For women, here's the takeaway. Never underestimate the power of a genuine compliment. Costs nothing, yet it can completely change how your partner sees himself and how he connects with you. Admiration fuels confidence, and confidence fuels deeper intimacy. So here's a question for you. Ladies, do you still compliment your partner? You'd be shocked at how powerful it is. For many men, those small words of recognition aren't just appreciated. They're the very thing they fantasize about most. And while admiration is deeply moving, the next fantasy goes even deeper, because it touches on intimacy in a way that most people don't talk about after 60. When most people think of intimacy, they imagine youth, fiery passion, quick sparks, urgency. But for men over 60, intimacy takes on an entirely different meaning, one that is slower, richer, and more soulful than what they may have experienced before. At this stage, the fantasy isn't about performance. It's about presence. For many men, this shift comes as a quiet relief. The pressure to impress, to move fast, or to prove something fades. Instead, intimacy becomes a chance to savor closeness. It's the lingering touches, the long moments of eye contact that say more than words, and the comfort of knowing that your body and soul are welcomed exactly as they are. Men fantasize not about fleeting passion, but about intimacy that feels timeless. Aldric felt this deeply one evening when he and Miriam sat on the porch after a long day. They didn't rush into conversation. They didn't need grand gestures. He simply placed his hand over hers, and they sat in silence as the cicadas hummed in the background. That simple touch, unhurried and unforced, was enough to flood him with a sense of belonging and connection. Later, when Miriam leaned her head on his shoulder, Aldric realized this was what he had been longing for. Intimacy that wasn't about speed, but about being fully present with one another. For men over 60, soulful intimacy often includes things like slow dancing in the living room, brushing a stray hair from a partner's face, or lying together in bed just listening to each other breathe. These small moments carry an intensity that can't be measured by physicality alone. It's about knowing you are fully seen, fully accepted, and fully loved in the moment. For women, the insight here is profound. Many men won't say this out loud, but when they dream of love, they don't fantasize about wild nights. They fantasize about closeness that heals the soul. A hand held in stillness, a kiss that lingers, a whispered word that affirms they are desired just as they are. And here's the gift. When a woman creates space for this kind of intimacy, the connection that blossoms is unshakable. It doesn't just deepen physical closeness, it strengthens trust, warmth, and emotional security. Have you felt that deeper connection in your own love story? Share your experience in the comments. You may inspire someone else to see intimacy in a new light. There comes a point in a man's life, often after 60, when love becomes less about what he can receive and more about what he can leave behind. Men at this stage secretly fantasize about creating memories that endure long after the moment has passed. It's not about grand monuments or lavish gifts. It's about small, lasting imprints that say, "I was here and I loved you with everything I had." For many men, This fantasy takes shape in the simplest gestures. A handwritten note slipped into a partner's book, so she discovers it when he's not around. A surprise weekend trip to a place she always dreamed of visiting but never thought she'd see. Passing down life lessons not by lecturing, but by showing. Teaching grandkids how to love gently by watching how he treats their grandmother. These are acts designed to outlive the moment, to remind the woman he loves that their story wasn't just shared, it was celebrated. Aldric felt this calling as his relationship with Miriam deepened. He began keeping a small journal where he would jot down moments. What she wore on their first date, the way she laughed when he told a terrible joke, the quiet look she gave him when words weren't needed. He told no one about it. But his secret fantasy was that someday, when he was no longer here, Miriam would find those pages and know she was cherished beyond measure. That was his legacy. Not wealth, not possessions, but love captured in ink, love made tangible in memory. Here's the truth. At this stage of life, men often measure success in love not by passion alone, but by permanence. They fantasize about giving their partners treasures that time can't erase. Whether it's planting a tree together, creating traditions that children and grandchildren will carry forward, or simply making sure that when their loved one looks back, the memories will be so vivid and warm that loneliness has no space to enter. For women, understanding this is vital. A man's legacy fantasy is never just about him. It's about ensuring that she feels loved in ways that ripple forward, long after he's gone. It's about leaving fingerprints of affection on her heart, one she can carry with her no matter what the future brings. And for Aldric, this final fantasy turned into his greatest joy, because it wasn't just about dreaming of love. It was about creating a love story that would outlast him, one memory at a time. When we first met Aldric, he was a 67-year-old widower from Ohio who quietly believed the best parts of love were behind him. The laughter-filled evenings, the playful moments, the tenderness of being truly known. He thought all of that ended when his first great love was buried with the past. But life had one more chapter waiting for him, and it didn't just bring him companionship. It brought him transformation. Through Miriam, Aldric discovered that love after 60 isn't a faded echo of youth. It's a deeper, richer symphony. He learned that vulnerability, once something he had guarded, could become his greatest strength. He discovered that playfulness wasn't lost with age. It could be rekindled with a shared smile or a silly dance in the kitchen. He felt the power of being admired not for who he once was, but for who he had become, a man of resilience, gentleness, and quiet strength. He experienced intimacy that wasn't rushed or pressured, but soulful, lingering, and profoundly healing. And most of all, he realized the truest legacy of love wasn't in grand gestures, but in the small, lasting memories that Miriam would carry in her heart forever. Aldric's story is not just his own. It's the story of countless men who, even if they never say it out loud, dream of giving their whole heart in these ways. Emotional safety, playfulness, admiration, intimacy, legacy. These aren't fleeting desires. They are lifelong fantasies, carried with men into the later seasons of life. And when a woman recognizes and nurtures these dreams, she doesn't just unlock a man's affection, she unlocks his deepest devotion. So, to the women watching, know this. Men may not always speak these things, but when they love, they dream of giving you their whole heart, safely, playfully, admiringly, intimately, and forever. And to the men watching, remember Aldric. Love doesn't end when your hair turns silver or your pace slows down. If anything, love begins again with more depth, more courage, and more tenderness than ever before. Aldric began as a man who thought his story had ended. He became a man who realized that the most beautiful chapters were still waiting to be written. And if you're listening now, so can you. If this video touched your heart, don't let it end here. Take a moment to hit that like button. It tells us this message mattered to you, and it helps more seniors discover that love is still alive and waiting for them. Share this video with a friend, a brother, a sister, or anyone over 60 who may quietly believe their best years of love are behind them. Sometimes all it takes is one reminder, one story, one spark to reignite hope. And you could be the one who delivers it. And if you haven't already, Subscribe to Senior Relationships After 60. This isn't just a channel. It's a community where stories like Aldric's come to life, where wisdom meets laughter, and where we remind each other that love is not reserved for the young, it belongs to every season of life. By subscribing, you're not just clicking a button. You're choosing to be part of a space that believes in second chances, fresh starts, and the kind of connection that grows stronger with age. Here's what I want you to take with you today. Love doesn't shrink with time. It doesn't disappear when the mirror shows new lines or when the pace of life slows. In fact, it deepens. It becomes softer yet stronger, quieter yet more profound. At 60, 70, or even 80, you are not at the end of your love story. You're at the beginning of the chapter that carries the most depth, the most tenderness, and the most meaning. So ask yourself, who in your life deserves to hear this today? Who do you know that needs to be reminded that they are still worthy of romance, admiration, laughter, and soulful intimacy? Share this with them, and in doing so, you may give them the courage to open their heart again. And as always, join the conversation below. Tell us your thoughts, your experiences, your stories of love after 60. You may find that your comment inspires someone else who is silently waiting for permission to believe again. Because here's the truth. Love doesn't fade with age. Deepens. And the more we remind each other of that, the more we keep love alive in the world.